Okay. Did you mute? Okay. I'm gonna send the link to the presentation in the chat. Okay, so today we'll be going over Windows FTP. So FTP is also known as File Transfer Protocol, and it's a service that allows you to upload and download files on your computer. It's generally insecure because the data is not encrypted if you haven't configured anything, but there are some settings that allow you to encrypt and secure this data, which makes it more secure. We'll also be going over FileZilla, which is an application used for FTP to transfer files. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is download all the necessary services. So I'm on my VM right now, and to download these things, we're going to open Server Manager. So you can find these services if you go to Manage and Add Roles and Features. Under Server Roles, you want to download, or you want to select everything here, basically. Especially in this tab. And you also want Management Tools, which we'll use to configure some different settings later. Remember to expand all of these folders so you can download everything. So I already downloaded these, but when you do download them, you'll have to like press next a few more times. But that's about it. You also need to download FTPs if you haven't downloaded it already on your VM, but it probably should be there if it's a required service. And we'll also need to set up our SSL certificate. So to do that, we've been over this before when we went over IAS, but to this you want to first open up IIS Manager. And you want to go to your server. And open up server certificates. And I've already added one here, but to create a certificate, you want to click on create a self-signed certificate, enter in a name, and then press OK, and that'll create a certificate. And we'll use that later. So the first thing we're going to do is set up a FTP site. If an FTP site isn't already set up for some reason, this is what you want to do. So we need a root folder first. This is usually already there, but if it's not, you should create it. We also need to give it access. So I'll show you where the folder is located. It's going to be likely in your C drive, and it's in this folder. It's called FTP root. So you want to know where this is because we're going to need it later. And then you want to type in this command to command prompt, and remember to run it as an administrator. Okay, so to create an FTP site, you want to open up IIS Manager. Right-click on this, and then click Add an FTP site. So you want to name it whatever you want to call it. So we'll just call this test. And then we want to navigate to the folder we were just in. So remember that's in local disk, this folder, and the FTP root. And you want to select that folder. Now you want to add an IP address. And then you want to click on Allow SSL, and then select your certificate that you made earlier. After you've done that, and this is the local host IP address. So this is a standard IP address. Okay, next you want to select basic and give this to specific roles specified roles or user groups, and then type in administrator. And then give them read and write permissions. And then you want to press finish. So I already created an FTP site earlier, so we'll use that. And next we'll go over FTP publishing. So if your site was already configured, like in the previous slide, then you won't need to do this. But if it's not, you want to add this line into the config file. So this file is located in System32. And then in Internet Services. And then in the config file. And it's going to be the application host file. So you want to press open. And if a prompt tells you that you can't open it or Windows can't find an application to open it, you want to select another application and use Notepad, because we can just edit this using Notepad. So now you want to locate the site, and to do that, you can do Control F and then the site name. So we have FTP site. And this is where our configurations are going to be for our FTP site. So you want to add under the bindings section, which is right here. I want to add this line, which is binding information is equal to port 21. But since we're going to configure this later, you don't need to add this. Now underneath this section, you want to add in this chunk of text, and it should look like this. And you'll see there's a server there's a hash here, and that's something we're going to add later. But you want to make sure you have the basic settings, which are right here. So you also want to set anonymous authentication to false here. Okay, at the very end of the file, you also want to put in this. So you should add this to the very end of the file as well. Okay, let's move on. Okay, once again, if you didn't manually configure or create the site, it might not have these configurations. So you should add them here. So you have to open up IIS Manager again, go to the site, click on FTP authentication. And you want to make sure that you've enabled basic authentication and disabled this other one. This is the same thing as pasting in these lines in this other section. Now we want to go back to the site and click on FTP authorization rules. And you want to add a rule. And underneath here, specified users, you want to add an administrator and then give them read or write if you haven't done so already. Next, this is how you're going to log into the site. So if you need to do that for any reason, you just want to type this into command prompt, and it will prompt you to ask for a username and a password. Okay, so earlier we had set up an SSL certificate. Now we're going to configure that. So when you open up IIS Manager again, you want to click on the site that you want to configure. Double click on FTP SSL settings, which is this right here. And then select custom. and then go into advanced, and you want to make sure that require only for credentials is checked. You also want to make sure this one is set to allow. And you also want to set use 128-bit encryption for SSL connections. And once you made those changes, remember to click on apply. Okay. So we're going to add the SSL certificate to the configuration file. So if you saw earlier, we had a hash, and we're going to add it into the config files. So under server certificates, so we want to go back to the server. Under server certificates, you want to find the certificate that you made and go to details or view. And in details, there should be a value that's titled thumbprint, and that's going to be the hash. It should be a hexadecimal hash. So you want to copy this, and then there's going to be a place that we're going to add it later. So you want to store that value. You can also copy it to a file if you want. Okay, now you want to add this line into your config file. So if we locate the config file again, you should add this line here. And you want to paste in the hash into where it says server cert hash equals, and then right here. So I already have it in here. It's going to be this. And there's a line that we had before here that we have to replace. Okay, now here's some more settings. So this one is going to be a show available bytes for the FTP site. So you want to go to the site again and click on FTP directory browsing. And you want to check available bytes, and again, click on apply. Okay, next we're going to install a tool that's used for FTP. And this is called File Server Resource Manager service. So we're going to open up Server Manager again. And under roles and features, should be under it's okay. It's right here, and you want to make sure that you've installed File Server Resource Manager right here. And this also prompts you to install File Server. So once you've installed that, so this part we can skip because it's going to be included already. But in older versions, you're going to have to manually add in quota usage report. So to actually view the folder quotas, you can open up File Resource Manager out now, or File Server Resource Manager. And if you go to quota management, quotas, you can create a quota. And then navigate to the FTP root folder. And then you can choose 100 megabytes, and then hit create. And now you should be able to see the folder quota. Okay, now we're going to configure the pass support range. These settings aren't very important, but in the case that you do have to configure them, This is how you do it. So the port range is going to be managed by the server, so we have to configure that under this actual server. To that, go to firewall support, and here you can set in the port range. And you can do the same thing in the FTP site. Firewall support. And here you can enter in the IP address. Okay. Here's some more commands to help you secure the firewall for FTP. Non-secure traffic, if you want to configure your firewall for any reason for non-secure traffic, you can enter in these commands. For secure traffic, you should enter in these two. And remember to run command prompt as an administrator. Okay, so some quick background for the firewall. So FTP uses port 21. So if you open port 21, that allows the client to send commands in the control channel. And the control channel won't actually allow you to upload and download files. There's also a channel called active data connections, which is on port 20. And it's a default way of connecting to the FTP server, but it's usually less effective than passive data connections, which is something that the FTP server sets up. And it's used for data channel listening. Okay. So now we're going to secure FTP with IIS Manager authentication. So this first line is going to be giving the network service account, reading and writing, or these first two are going to grant the network service account access to this folder, and you want to grant it reading and writing privileges, or reading privileges. Okay, next you want to make sure you have the IIS management service installed. So once again, that is located in Server Manager. And we've been over this, but it's going to be located here under Management Tools, and you want to just select all of these different tools. So once you've installed those, we can now use the IIS Management Service. So in the server home, you will now be able to see the management service icon, which is here. And you want to select this option. And if this is checked for any reason, you want to uncheck it. And you also want to hit apply as well. Okay, we're going to create a manager for our FTP server here. So the first thing we want to do is go to the server home again, and then IIS Manager users. You want to click on Add User, and then create the user. So we have FTP Manager, and whatever password you want. So now that we created the user, you can go back to the site. So we have FTP site, and we're going to go to FTP authorization rules or manager permissions, or not, FTP authorization rules, and you want to add another rule, and then specific user, FTP manager, and then give them read and write. So we have that here. Okay, the last thing we want to do is set up FTP user isolation. So before we do this, let's set up a directory, because we're going to restrict the users who are able to use it to having a physical directory in the computer. So to that, you have to create a directory here. In the FTP root folder. So it should be in local user and then the title of the user, so we have administrator. Okay, once you've created that directory, you can go to the site again. And then go to FTP user isolation, which is right here. And you want to select this option. So this will restrict all the users to only the ones that have a physical directory in the FTP root folder. So those are all the configurations and settings for FTP. Now we'll be configuring FileZilla, which is an application. So you want to download the FileZilla server application, which is going to be here. And you want to download it and run the setup process. So when we open it, so most of the security settings in FileZilla are going to be found in FileZilla server options, which is going to be here. So if you go to edit and then okay, I don't know why it's not working, but it should be in settings. Here, I'll open up this guide so I can actually show you. Okay, so the first thing is going to be changing the admin password. The interface is going to look a bit different because this is an older version. So the first thing is going to be changing the password for the administrator account. So to do this, you have to go to settings, FileZilla server options, and then the admin interface settings. And you want to set in the password right here. Next is going to be changing the welcome message, which is here. And you want to, if there is a %v, which is going to display the version of the FileZilla server, as long as you've deleted that, it doesn't really matter what message you want to put. And that is under general settings. Next thing is going to be enabling FTP for one address. And this is going to be under IP bindings, and you want to change that to 127.0.0.1, which is right here. And you want to make it 120. You want to make this this specific IP address so everything is going to be binded to a single IP address. And now you want to configure access control. So to do this, this is basically restricting what specific users can do in FileZilla. So in order to do this, you have to create users first. But you can also do this in general for the application. So this will be under IP filter, and you can add any IPs that you would like to ban. But you can also do this on the user level. And to do that, you want to go to edit, and then there should be this tab, and you want to click on that. go to users and groups, settings, and then IP filters. Okay, next is enabling bounce attack protection. So if you go to edit, settings, server options again, and the security settings, which is here, you want to click this first level. Okay, next is enabling automatic bans. So you want to go to the auto ban section, and you can set this to whatever value you want. I would go with the higher value because that's generally more secure. Okay, next is configuring least privilege. This is similar to user privileges like in a file or in a folder on your actual computer. So if you go to users and shared folders, it's going to look something like this. Before we talked about IP filter, that's going to be here, and you can add in the IP. It'll prompt you with a box. You can, if you have a user here, you want to select it, and then whatever permissions you want to give them, you can choose here. You want to enable TLS encryption authentication. So this is basically securing everything on a user level because we've already done auto ban. So that's going to be in the general tab. And you want to force TLS, there's going to be a box that says force TLS, and you want to check that. Okay, next is enable logging. So this is again in the server options tab. And you want to enable log into a file, and you also want to use a different log file for each day. And under miscellaneous, you also want to check do not show passwords in message log. That's going to be this tab, and there's going to be another checkbox. And the last configuration is going to be enabling FTP over TLS. So this is, again, in server options, and then this is in the FTP over TLS settings. Okay, it's not here, but you want to check enable FTP over TLS support. And there's also another checkbox that says disallow plain unencrypted FTP, and you also want to create a certificate or select one if needed. It's going to show you a place where you want to choose a encryption certificate, but you want to, if there isn't one existing there, you can create one. Okay, that's it. Does anyone have any questions?